Welcome to the Branding Laboratory. I'm your host, Deevo, and today we're going to be diving into a new guest on the show, obviously. She's an entrepreneur, she's a business owner, and she is a leader who recently became a corporate refugee, like me, and joined the entrepreneurial world. And we're going to talk about growth. Growth is going to be the centerpiece of this conversation, and not just in revenue or market share, but a sustainable and intentional and strategic growth that doesn't just leave you burnt out or overwhelmed, but really still enables you to continue pushing the needle, but still feel inspired and impassioned about what you're doing. And that's the reason why she left the corporate world, is so that she could regain that lost passion that she had for business and for building and things of that nature. And we all know that a great idea isn't just enough for growth. It requires strategy. And strategy without execution is just a wish list. It's just an idea sitting on a shelf somewhere. And execution without strategy is just busy work. So how do we bridge the gap between the two? And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. Growth, strategy, execution, and how all three of those go hand in hand. And my guest today is somebody who did this for many years in the corporate world for multiple corporations and organizations. And she's now stepped into the entrepreneurial space. She is the founder of North 12 Partners. She is a fractional chief strategy and growth officer. Wow, I need a cool title like that. And she's spent over 20 years helping businesses scale internally with their own organizations, and now as an entrepreneur with clarity and confidence and, again, continuous growing without losing the passion. She's worked with CEOs and leadership teams to help them really define their true north and translate big picture ideas into tangible results. So that's on paper. We're going to learn exactly what she does, and we're going to go a little bit deeper than just a surface level business conversation, and you really get to know who she is, what she believes, and how she helps businesses not just grow, but thrive. And I'm going to dig into her journey, her leadership style, and just really get to know who this fantastic guest is, Shay Prosser. And hopefully at the end of the show, you'll be able to pick up a thing or two. So, Shay, welcome to the Branding Laboratory. I just introduced you and I said all sorts of fantastic things about you, but you're going to have to wait till the show comes out to hear them.
Good. I can't wait to listen to it. I've been listening to a few of your podcasts and I love the other guests, so can't wait to hear what you said about me.
What's your takeaway from the podcast so far?
I like the
Don't candy coat it either.
I think I don't candy coat much. That's part of my value prop, right? I think you're bringing on people that have a unique point of view, but also actionable. You're working with entrepreneurs, you're working with small businesses. We need things that we can do
Yeah.
versus
Yeah.
just the big theories. So I like that. I listened to one of your PR friends the other day, the Blaze PR,
Yeah.
had great stuff on just how to do it. Being an entrepreneur is about getting things done and doing things differently. That's what I've liked about him so far.
What I'd like to uncover with you today is, again, who knows where it's going to go with the rabbit hole, but really this idea of what you do first and foremost. And so get to that and how you're making a difference in the organizations that you're working with, why you decided to become a corporate refugee. And then once you're in this space, you're helping people grow with strategy and execution and having the ability to stay empowered in what they're doing, but also be able to continuously push the needle, in your case, the true north. So that's where the discussion should go. And I guess I always start with you in terms of your journey and you looking back at your career, and you worked in the corporate space for 20 plus years, and then you decided that you wanted to become a full-time entrepreneur. Can you just talk a little bit about first, maybe the defining moment that really pushed you out of the corporate space and into this entrepreneurial space?
Yeah, I've been pushed out a couple times over the course of my career. This is my third business. I've said I started one in my 20s, I started one in my 30s, and now I'm eking out one right before I turned 50. So technically still in the 40s. I'm self-described business geek. I've always been that way. Grew up in family business, and my parents actually offered my college money and said, if you want to start a business instead, you're more than welcome to take your college money and do that. Being 18, I was didn't have the direction. So I went ahead and went to college and then started working right after. The journey I've been on has been I've worked for all different sizes of organizations, everything from a two-person startup to Microsoft, and all for several years, at the point when you could have worked someplace for 4 or 5, 6 years. So I've got a wealth of knowledge, both being internal to corporate as well as being an entrepreneur. And then also working for other people's companies that are 20, 50, 80, or a couple hundred people, mostly in the marketing and sales, but some of it operations. When you're in a small business, as an executive, you don't get to stay in one lane. You might be sitting talking to your CFO about pricing strategies, and then the next time talking to your business transformation officer or your operations person about internal IT and what needs to happen. What I've really done this time is taken all of that knowledge and now I'm using it to help small and mid-sized businesses grow. Often, CEOs, business owners don't have somebody next to them that they can trust, has knowledge in all of these different areas to help them scale and grow. But they know they need more than that junior level person that they might already have on staff that
Mhm.
doesn't have the experience to see around corners.
In a nutshell, let's see how well you know your business. What problem do you solve?
I really solve the problem of people not having a strategy that's actionable. They might have this pie in the sky strategy and be like, oh, we're going to do all these great things. But then they get caught in the day to day of their business. So, what I solve is bridging that gap between strategy and execution and helping people put it in bite size portions so that you can then go do it. And then, really, in the ideal case, serve as their fractional growth and strategy officer and go along and do it with them. So, I'll give you an example. I was one of my clients, I'm working with them to really understand what their clients see in the value. They've been with their clients for several years, but we're trying, of course, to get more like them. The CEO has wondered forever about getting really good candid feedback from her clients, but she doesn't want some random talking to them. So I'm doing an assessment of their clients right now. So I spent an hour with each of their top clients over the last couple of days, digging into why they use the service, what they really love about it. And it's beyond marketing. It is how do we replicate this kind of client and the high level of service and scale this business so that we can do this for 10 times as many clients. And that's a trust thing. That CEO doesn't want just anybody talking to her top clients and spending an hour with them. That's a thing you got to be aware of, is who's talking to your clients. But she has absolute trust that I can, have that conversation, then also use it to get actionable strategies for her.
So you've been doing this for 20 years, both
Mhm.
as an entrepreneur in some way, shape, or another, also for other businesses. Let's pull back the curtain a little bit because buzzwords are easy to use. People talk
Yeah.
about strategy, people talk about execution, implementation, KPIs. One of the things
Yeah.
that frustrates me the most about the corporate space is like this idea that everything is in this linear trajectory and everything is just supposed to work out the way we plan, and nothing ever does. So, in your space now and operating in both sides of the world, pull back the cover for me for a minute. What actually is strategy behind the scenes? When people throw out the words of strategy, we need better
Yeah.
strategy for this business. What actually does that mean? And I don't mean I'm not trying to be a smartass here, but I'm just
Yeah.
trying to understand from your perspective when you say your company lacks a strategy, what does that actually mean behind the curtain?
Yeah, and I totally agree. Strategy can mean 18 different things. And then when you get somebody working on it, it can mean a lot of different things. So I'll give you, for instance, in mine, it is about simplicity. It's about figuring out, knowing your purpose. I am a believer in mission, vision, values, but I'm not a believer in a 45-page deck that is about your mission, vision, values. I was talking to a CEO the other day who it's about a 200 person company. They had a strategist who took them off site for a week and just did mission, vision, values.
I've been part of those many times in corporate world.
Okay, so that kind of
We
strategy,
wonder why our budget is fucked up. We just spent
ah,
maybe $400,000 to bring the management team to Costa Rica to spend a week doing absolutely jack shit, building a
yeah,
balanced scorecard that nobody's going to implement when they get back because nobody even fucking knows what a balanced
oh
scorecard
gosh.
is.
And then they do 45 lines for each person. They're like, everybody has to have at least three things. And all of a sudden, you've got this huge spreadsheet of darn things that people are like, I'm going to grow, I'm going to be nicer to customers. And you're like, okay, then that's not strategy. What are you going to do? So, what I do is really boil it down. So, if we do mission, vision, values, like going through this with a client right now, we're just trying to get the values down so that we can talk about how their team is expected to execute and make sure they're living them. It's not about having this huge slide deck about what values mean. It's about how are we expecting people to show up? And then also, how are we figuring out what clients are right for us? Because we all have to have clients that are not right for us, ones that we talk to and know that they're not the right person. We're not going to be able to do great work with them. They're going to drive our staff crazy, whatever it is. So when I look at strategy, it's really looking at, one of the things I do with people is what I call a 12-point roadmap to accelerate growth. And it's about knowing your purpose, knowing your ideal customer, knowing your unique value proposition, having a defined growth strategy. And that can sometimes be simple. It might be that you need to go to each of your clients and find out where they get their advice and see if they can introduce you to somebody else. Because
Yeah.
not all companies need hundreds or thousands of clients. Some of them need just 10 more. So looking at what that really looks like. Strategy is about figuring out where you're going and creating an actual roadmap to get there that you're going to do versus something you're going to stick on a shelf.
A couple of things you said really resonated with me, the simplicity of it. I think a lot of times people think they have to have these catchy words with all this really cool vernacular, and it's just, dude, you've heard the acronym KISS, KISS, just keep it simple, stupid. And the mission, the vision, the values, those are all great, and I do those with my clients. But
Mm-hmm.
the reason we do those is not so that we have a giant banner in our front conference room when we walk in. It's so that the people who are running the business can start to understand a foundation for their messaging and
Yep.
what does their messages look like. And so if you understand your mission, in your case, your North Star, if you understand where you want this company to be, in our case as entrepreneurs, what are we trying to grow into? And then most importantly, what do we stand for in our values? Those three things. So what I heard you say is they're really important, but they shouldn't be the end all to what ultimately spells or dispels your business's success. Those should be foundational tenets that we're going to build our strategy upon so that we can better identify what problems do we solve, what's our strategy, and then ultimately how are we going to build this business. Is that kind of a fair
Yeah,
assessment? So,
absolutely.
so you figured out and simplified this strategy, and then what does execution actually look like for you?
Yeah, the execution obviously is unique to each client. It's figuring out which things on the roadmap are most important. For instance, talking to somebody who's in an earlier stage or maybe hasn't done some of this foundational work, we look at what do you need to do to get that foundation set? For instance, one of the points on the roadmap is embracing innovation. If you don't have that foundation set of what are your processes? What does your team do? Do you have a good definition of what problems you solve? You can't innovate. So we really look at what pieces are most important. If somebody's at a later stage and they're, more developed in their business, then we might be talking about innovation. We might be talking about, okay, you've got your services, it's pretty clear, you've got some of these strategies done, then what does execution look like on innovating? Like how do you effectively innovate versus just talking about things? Because I think often you get entrepreneurs and they go around and they get super excited about things, but then they don't know which things they should actually do
Yeah.
versus which things need to be put in the ideas for later pile.
It sounds like you're having a DEF CON 5 moment over there. Is everything okay? I hear.
Sorry, my household, when you tell them to be quiet, they try to get closer and be louder.
And it
They,
should be noted that everybody's off school today, so I'm dealing with the exact same quandary.
yeah.
If you could only pick one thing from, let's just call it a deck. So we have mission, we have vision, we have values. I'm just putting all the
Yeah.
primary tenets that go into a brand message. Mission, vision, values, unique value proposition, a customer avatar, having some clarity on that,
Mhm.
and let's say purpose around it. But you can only pick one of those to build your next business. Everything else is like thrown by the wayside. What would you say is the single most important piece for an entrepreneur building a business to have at least a clear, crystallized understanding of?
Yeah. Purpose, in that you need to look at what is your purpose? Why do you exist? We can all say that businesses are a great idea. There's hundreds of patents on things that somebody thought were a good idea, but nobody needed.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at the purpose, and the purpose needs to be defined in what problem are you solving?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why do you exist in the world? I know why I exist is that entrepreneurs have a gap between themselves and the people who are doing the work. So they know maybe where they want to go, but they don't know exactly how to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that they might have on their team are fantastic doers or they're fantastic at different places, but they don't know how to bridge that gap between where it is we want to go and what do we need to do to get there. So I
Mm-hmm.
exist in that space. But I think you need to have the purpose to know where you're going.
Has this rubric, this philosophy that you hold right now around this, and you've been doing this for a while now, 20
Yeah.
plus years, have you noticed an evolution in sort of your personal beliefs and philosophies around business and building things and strategy and execution from where you were 20 years ago to where you are now? And if so, what's the biggest difference?
I think the biggest difference is I'm much more about action than I was 20 years ago. I used to think I had to have it all figured out and then take action. And I think that you can get in this spiral of, oh, I figured it out. Now I need to figure it out again, or I need to make it better. So I'll tell you one of the things I did in my the business I started in my 30s. It was a financial education business. And we wrote a book. Great book. It was on personal finance. It did wonders for our business because it was a great thing that you could give to people. The thing I did that was stupid was I wrote a second book. So you have all this time spent on thinking about things that we should have been, me and the business partner should have been in front of people building the business. So our business slowed while we wrote a second book. The business was still fine, but that second book didn't do the things that we need for us. So I look at it and go, what is the simplest action that you can take now that is likely to be effective versus thinking and getting that action perfect, but waiting a long time to do it.
But you wouldn't have that same perspective though had the book blown up.
Yeah, absolutely. What's funny though is the first book is the one that got us all the business. The first book was much simpler. It was more direct, and it's the one that, the second one was a deep dive into a certain part of finance versus the first one was more general. And I still have people say that they read it and it's still on Amazon 10 years later, but I still have people come up to me about the first one. So you're right. Had the second one blown up, maybe I'd say something different, but I also could have spent that time getting some more clients, sorry, versus writing at 3 o'clock in the morning while my kids were asleep.
Yeah, I hear your perspective. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it 100%. I think you just don't know what you don't know. And there is a case to be made that you were trying to expand on something that worked. And had it worked, you wouldn't be having the same conversation or context. But my takeaway from that is the awareness around what didn't work and being able to pivot, because not a lot of people do that. A lot of people say, yeah, I saw that didn't work, but I'm just going to keep doing the same thing. And I was literally sitting, you're going to laugh at this, sitting in the sauna half naked with having a conversation with a dude that I see every morning in the sauna. And somehow we got talking into business and what I do. And he runs a water purification business, and he's struggling with figuring out how he can attract a new audience, because mostly from his perspective it's sort of family and friends type of thing. And I was like, so what have it just doesn't work, everything I've tried doesn't work. And I was like, so what are you doing? I'm still doing the same thing. And I was like, wait, you just said none of that has worked and you're wasting all this money. Let's take a step back for a minute and look at what is working and what's not working, and then let's make some judicious decisions. So not a lot of people have that awareness around it. And I don't know that it's necessarily inadequacy. I just don't think a lot of people have the acumen to run businesses the proper way, because they've never had people to guide them in the space. And like you said, like you had this really great idea. So a lot of entrepreneurs like, hey, I have this really great idea. I'm just going to build it and they will come. And it just doesn't work that way. There are so many different variables, especially in today's marketplace, right? It's interesting. I run a mastermind, which you've been a part of. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And the centerpiece around this mastermind is this intersection between personal development and professional development. And I don't see them as separate silos. They're one and the same. When you look at Shay Prosser's journey personally, how has that mirrored how you've grown professionally so far? And what are some of the gaps that you've seen along the way?
I think the more you're honest about both the personal and professional, and honest doesn't mean that you need to tell everybody everything. Nobody wants to know all the details of either personal or professional life. But I think that the more you can be honest about that with yourself and with the people around you, I think it's better. I think that I've grown in that, being a young woman in business in my 30s, especially this is way pre-pandemic, pre-Zoom, pre-everything. I felt a big need to keep my personal life completely separate. I didn't talk about being a mother. I used to laugh that anyone who knew me knew that I always had a 1 o'clock in South Charlotte when I was making appointments. I would say, absolutely, I'd be happy to meet can we do an early lunch? I've got a 1 o'clock in South Charlotte. My 1 o'clock in South Charlotte was picking up my kids from preschool. So I was running a business and I would run in, and the preschool teachers knew. They thought it was hilarious. They're like, I was either no makeup and hair on top of my head because I was working in the business before the days of Zoom. And they'd be like, oh, you're working at home today. You don't have meetings. Or I'd be running in at 1:05 apologizing with heels on in a full business suit, full makeup. And they'd be like, you had meetings today, and hand me snotty and dirty kids. That felt like I had to have very separate things, because I couldn't be, in my mind, a successful woman in business and be transparent about my real life. Now, fast forward, my kids are older. I'm starting a different business. And yeah, you and I are doing this podcast, and yep, Sid's getting out the door and being too loud, because that's just the way my life goes. And I don't feel the need to say, oh, does that make me a lesser business person because I actually have a life? And you don't have to have kids to have a personal life. You just, people being honest about your personal life in a way that is authentic, I think helps. And also, our personal lives give us perspective on business. I've been involved in my own family business. We've bought my husband's business from his family. Those things intersect a lot. And I actually think give me a whole lot of perspective. I was talking to a prospect the other day that's in family business. I'm like, oh, yeah, I get a lot of aspects of that. He's, oh, you know what it's like to be around the Thanksgiving table and not talking about the fact that everybody just lost the big client. I'm like,
Mm.
yep, yep. It adds perspective.
Yeah, it's cool to be vulnerable these days.
Hmm.
But I don't think that if you're using your vulnerability, whether it's your children or your personal life, as the platform to fuel your marketing is probably the best way to go. But being transparent about the stuff that you struggle from, the things that you're dealing with, it builds that relatability with your audience. So I fully endorse that. In terms of you and what you do for businesses now, you're basically to encapsulate that you're helping people big picture establish their own true north, right? And as part of that, you're obviously going to start to be exposed to a lot of other people's and entrepreneurs and businesses shortcomings. Do you in the space so far that you operate, are you seeing some common mistakes that a lot of businesses are making when trying to scale that you're already targeted and are able to assist with?
Yeah. Common mistakes are businesses are made up of people. And some of the common mistakes are either not understanding the people in your organization and what their skill set is, or adapting your business too much to the skill set that you have. So, for instance, I've seen it where people will say, okay, we've got these people, so I'm going to need to reorg my business in a way that she can go over here and he can go over here. And that can end up in a spot where you have the wrong people in the wrong role. You're not asking the question, do they want to be in that spot? Do they have the skill set for that spot? And I do believe it should be about the business first. You need to know what the business needs to grow and then look at the people and go, all right, do we have the right people in the right spot? Because you might have somebody who can grow that is very different than what they're doing. So, one of the teams that I built, a marketing team that I built, we had an opening for a graphic designer. And I was looking external, and somebody told me that somebody in the benefits department, this was somebody who was working in a completely different department, had a design degree and she wanted to apply, but she was too scared
Hmm.
because she's a more introverted person. And I said, just have her apply. And I need to know what kind of stuff she's done. And at that time, she was using that degree to do some work for her church.
Mm.
She timidly came and, put her application in and came to me with this whole group of things. Hired her. She ended up being a fantastic graphic designer. And she stayed with me for a number of years and went on to a different role at a bigger company. So that kind of thing is, I think people don't look at it holistically, what the business needs and what the people do, and they neglect to ask the people what they want to.
Is there ever a moment, is there ever a parallel path, I guess is a better way to ask that question. Is there ever a parallel path for companies that have staff, that have FTE, people on
Yeah.
staff that have been working for some time within the company? And maybe the company is hiring you to scale or expand or productize or whatever it is that you've been hired for. Is there ever a parallel path? Because you said business first, people second. But I'm wondering, is there a parallel path for companies that have staff on site that are in the trenches, that are foot soldiers on the ground, that have seen what works, what doesn't, where you're getting their input simultaneously to helping the executive team expand this new market share and working both angles at the same time? Because you just don't know what you don't know. And I know, having done this in my previous corporate life, one of the biggest changes we ever made was getting our team's
Yeah.
input on processes. And there's so many, because like you said, your person who just was too afraid to step up. A lot of times employees are like, I'm not going to step on anybody's toes. I'm just going to stay silent in my corner. But if you actually ask them what's working, what's not working, you'll be surprised sometimes some of the genius that comes out of this.
Oh, totally. I absolutely agree. I think that the team needs to be involved and be involved strategically. And it's not necessarily, if you've got multiple layers of management, it's not necessarily just the layer beneath the executives. I want to
Hmm.
know the front line. And
Hmm.
when I say business first, it's more that the needs of the business need to be outlined prior to just the needs of the people. So what people will do is they'll go, she's good at graphic design, so we're going to have her do all this stuff. We got to go, what's the need of the business? Because I firmly believe that you want people that are passionate about their role, they're passionate about what they're doing, but the thriving business is what keeps the food on their table. So if you're serving the needs of the business, then you're also serving the needs of the people. It's not oh, this is over here and the people are ignored, because the people are what makes it happen. To that point, yes, I think that talking to the team and understanding what needs to happen and getting their input, there might be processes that are too cumbersome, that don't seem cumbersome to you. But I was talking to a CEO that sat down with his customer service team and realized that what seemed simple about their customer, that their CRM, is you could get to everything. What he found out by sitting with them for a little while was that it took 3 clicks to get into the customer record. Okay, that's fine, except for when you're on the phone with a customer, if it's taking you 3 clicks, you're not paying attention to that customer. So what he figured out is it was a need that they needed to do in the next design of that software so that it's 1 click, so that people could listen better. So it's things like that you have to get the input of your team to understand what their day-to-day looks like, and then how the company can do better.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sometimes executives, especially CEOs or entrepreneurs who have large staffs or even small staffs, you're not on the pulse of everything. You look big picture and you're not paying attention to it. But that leads me to another question, and I'm just curious about your opinion on it. There are two types of CEOs that I have encountered in my experience. There's a CEO that sort of feels like they have earned that position, and reputationally, it's not their job to be in the trenches with their team because they're like ivory tower, if you will, right? And then there's the other CEO who, for whatever reason, has a completely different mindset, wrong or indifferent, that their job is to lead people, not the company, right? So there's two different modalities. There's the CEO who believes that they're only beholden to the shareholders or the market or whatever it is, just lead the company, right? I'm the senior pinnacle of the company. And then there's the leader who is, my job is to lead the people because the people make up the company. So where do you fall in that space? I'm just curious. Or do you have a different version?
I'm in complete agreement with you. I've always said you have to have an ego to be a CEO. There's a piece of it, anybody who's an entrepreneur or a CEO, that does have this, you should follow me. I have an ego. That said, I agree with you that those are the two main types of CEOs. And I think that the leader of people is the one that I want to work with, and the one that I want to do business with, because it's not about being a softie or letting people do one over on you. It's about understanding the needs of people, because your clients are people and your team is people. So if you don't understand the dynamics that happen, you're missing something. One of my hallmarks that I've said, and it's held true, I've served the HR industry for a long time. When I look at companies that truly are about the people, the CHRO, or the VP of HR, reports to the CEO. When they report to somebody else, it gets lost. The CEO needs to want to have that ear of the people and understanding what's going on. And they can figure out the things that are going on in the organization through being very close with the HR leader.
So, as it pertains to that perspective, if you're a people person leader, and I am as well, and you talk about defining a company's true north, what does that process look like if you're a people person leader as opposed to a CEO who's beholden only to the shareholders?
Yeah, I think it's digging into some of the processes and the roles and the responsibilities, because I've found that people thrive when we were talking about strategy earlier, that whole huge strategy deck, and then they get down to the end and it's, let's fit on the, frontline team. We're going to give them some goals that don't make sense. When you're really looking at roles and responsibilities in people, you're asking them, what are the things that are most impactful in your role? And it's not saying that they just get to pick weird metrics. People want to feel fulfilled. They want to feel like they're doing a good job, and they want to know what a good job looks like. By helping understand what processes they're supposed to do things, what's their role, what's their responsibility, then you can create a system in which they feel good every day. Everyone has a purpose, right? And that purpose might be that they're a people person and they're supposed to talk to customers all day long and they're supposed to make customers feel happy. That might be that their job. or it might be something that is internally facing and, producing a really good report is a good job. So I think when you listen to the people and let them be involved in the process of creating the metrics and the roles and the responsibilities, you'll be shocked at what they bring to the table. And then they feel like a team because they know what they're supposed to do too, and they know what somebody else is supposed to do. Oh, I can't hear you.
I think this number might be skewed, but I believe it's only somewhere between 5 to 15%. It's a very nominal number of startups actually succeed past their fifth year.
Yeah.
It might even be lower than that. Do you think that most businesses fail because of poor strategy or poor execution, or do you think there's something deeper behind that?
I think it's both. I think that it's either focusing so much on strategy and not focusing on execution. That can be a barrier. I think often people don't understand the runway that it takes to start a business. When they say it takes 3 to 5 years to be profitable in a business, that's a real number. I'm not talking about VC funded startups and somebody's just giving you a bag of cash. That still is going to take you a while to be profitable, whether you've been handed a bag of cash or not. So I think people are unrealistic and
Revenue earning, not just
yeah,
because you have
revenue
money in the
earning.
bank. Are you
Yep.
actually making money from your
Yep.
business? Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that people underestimate that runway. And maybe just as they're getting going, they have to stop because they need to go do something else. Yeah. A vast majority fail within the first X amount of time. But I think it's a strategy and an execution thing. They might have all the strategy in the world, but not execute,
Hmm.
um, not get in front of clients. When you're in the beginnings of a business, you need to be in front of as many viable prospects as possible. And that has to be the number one priority.
As a leader of a company, when you start to see something that's not working, whether it's in a failure state or your revenue or whatever it is, your marketing is not working, do you personally look at decision making as a leader, whether as a CEO or as a consultant for these agencies? Do you look at from a decision making, do you look at it from a data driven approach, an intuition based approach, or is there this pragmatic intermix of both? Like, how do you make decisions that are best for you and your company as well as for the consultancy that you're employed by?
Yeah. So I do think it's a mix. Data informs that intuition and it'll confirm or deny it. But when you see something that your intuition or you have an inkling about, you also can't ignore that. But maybe you go and get the data to inform that decision. I think people can go down a rabbit hole of too much data and not knowing how to interpret it. And that's where I think being able to interpret the correct data. If you're talking about marketing data, people will be like, all right, how many clicks did I get? Okay, maybe you got 1 million clicks, but did anybody actually follow through and do the thing that you asked them to do? Did they do the actual call to action? So people will get hung up on different metrics versus thinking about what they need in the business and using their intuition. And I think also asking questions. I think asking questions of your team, asking questions about what they're looking at, use your intuition, but also have trust and build trust in your team because they have intuition too. One of the things that I used to listen to when I was at an HR advisory company is we had a call line, right? So I would walk down the hall and I would ask, as the leader of marketing, I would ask our HR advisors what the trends are, like what's going on. And they would just know because they would have talked to, it's not like everyone's calling in with the same question, but they'd be like, oh, political discussions in the workplace are up. And this wouldn't be around election time. They'd just be like, all right, this is what's up. So I would use that to go inform. They had a much better read on what was going on in the marketplace than I did. So I'd use that. We'd send out an article on those topics. Undoubtedly, the best read things were things that I got from the HR advisors.
Is there a hard or a soft read on that? What's that fine line between the data, you've been presented with all the data, it's telling you go left, but your gut is saying go right? So how do you ultimately decide to trust on your gut, or how do you ultimately decide to trust on the data? What's that fine decision line
Yeah.
for you?
I think
And it may
it's,
be different in
yeah,
every situation. I'm not saying that there's a standard, but I'm assuming a person of your intellect and a person of your experience, having seen enough of these types of experiences and faced with these decision modalities at certain vectors, I'm assuming you have some sort of a rubric that you follow internally. And I'm just wondering, does that look like as a leader?
Yeah. I think when you get really to a crossroads, when you're looking at the data one way and your intuition the other, sometimes it's time to stop for a minute and one will rise to the surface. Sometimes it's giving yourself the night to sleep on it to not
Mm,
make that decision.
mm,
Because many of the decisions that we think are time sensitive or this burning fire,
mm,
we need to look at whether they really are. Is it a
mm.
burning fire because we've decided it? I was reading Nick Egan's book the other day, Shift.
Great
And
book.
one of the things he says is, I'll paraphrase, it's about the idea that panic is because we put a time on it. So the concept that we've created this fire drill, I'm not saying sit on it forever, but sometimes we push ourselves into decisions that maybe we're not ready to make.
Mm.
So give yourself a minute, and then either the data or the intuition is really going to be the right way to go. And as a CEO, you got to trust your intuition to a certain degree. Some of the data is not always numbers. Some of the data is asking your team what they think about this decision. And they might think X and you might think Y. At the end of the day, you're the CEO.
I asked you, I did an exercise with you a couple of weeks ago, and I want to shift into leadership. And leadership is a really big piece for how I think CEOs, entrepreneurs, personal brand or not, show up in the marketplace. And one of the things you said in there was effectively, and I'm paraphrasing just like off the top of my head here. You said effective leadership centers around strategy, directed action, and demonstrable results. What does that mean in a leadership capacity? Demonstrable results. Explain that a little bit.
Yeah, it's looking at what the results are you're wanting, whether it's an internal result, it's whether it's employee engagement, looking at your team and saying, all right, the results are our team is saying that they're engaged, they're not leaving, our turnover is low, our employee satisfaction is high, and our client satisfaction is high. All right, that's demonstrable results that are
Mm,
both felt as well as able to be quantified numerically. Right, low turnover of the people that you want to stay.
mm,
Looking at, are you losing key leaders? Are you losing important players? So then I think on the external, it's the results of your client retention, your client satisfaction, and ultimately revenue is the end. Revenue is the thing that we're all driving for, but it's not just revenue for sake of revenue. If I get a client that's never going to be a client again and my business is supposed to have recurring business, that's revenue that is not the best for the business.
mm.
So I look at that as the ultimate end result, but the actions that you take to get to those results, I guess I was talking about demonstrable results, is both metrics and the growth of the business.
Have you always held this position on leadership, or has that evolved over time?
I think it's evolved over time.
So if I were to speak to 20 years ago, Shay, and I were to say, what does leadership mean to you? How would you have defined it 20 years ago?
I think when I first started out, it was leadership is somebody that's supposed to tell you what to do. And I think that that's not how I see leadership today. Leadership is about putting the trust in your people, giving them the direction that you're going in, and helping them understand what their place is in that, but then building trust that they are the expert in their space.
Mm,
And even if they're much less seasoned than you are, right? I've led teams where people are 20 years my junior. I will tell you that they are way more skilled at very specific things than I am. I have a really broad range of experience. There's nothing in marketing that I haven't done,
mm,
from running huge launches and huge events to running all sorts of campaigns. But trusting that your people are more knowledgeable than you in the space that they are experts in takes some humility. And I think that's the piece of leadership that is really important. And also helping your people grow. I told you about that graphic designer earlier. When she came to move on to the next company, it's actually one of my favorite days because she came to me. She's, I hate this. I don't want to leave you. And but I've got this great opportunity at a really big agency. It was a global agency. We were at a regional organization. And that was one of my favorite days that I said, hey, as a leader, I'm going to tell you, I want you to stay. I want you to consider this. I want you to be on my team. And I was like, I got to take off my leader hat right now. And I got to put on my what's best for you hat. And that hat is, I think you need global experience.
mm.
I think you need to, for your career to advance and for you to grow personally. I think you've hit the point where I don't know that I have an opportunity for you to continue to grow here in the way that you're going to be able to grow in that new thing. So
That's a tough thing to master for entrepreneurs, though, especially if
Yeah.
you've never had any experience working with teams or any experience working in the corporate backdrop like you have, is taking your hands off the wheel and hiring other people and trusting that those other people are going to be able to do what you've done most of your life in this entrepreneurial quest. How does an entrepreneur learn to take their hands off the wheel and trust whether they're contractors or whether they've hired? In my case, I have a new employee that works full time, and I call her my operator. You've met her,
Yeah.
Marielle, and she's phenomenal, but I still find myself, do I need to step in on this? It's not as quickly as I would do it, it's not as efficient as I might do it. She's doing phenomenally better in so many other areas, but sometimes I need to step in and micromanage this. So, how do you advise people, if you're working in that capacity of leadership, to tell the entrepreneurs, the CEOs, it's really important that you stay in your lane, find people to handle the things that they're good at or that you don't need to be touching, and take your hands off the wheel? What's that look like?
I'm a big believer in trust but verify. And trust is built. It's not like you bring somebody in and you just throw everything on them and you go walk away.
I did
Um,
sometimes.
yeah, yeah. I
Just,
mean, and sometimes we
Mariel,
want to,
figure this
right?
out and read my mind, okay? I don't want to have to do any
Yeah,
time training. Just figure it out.
yeah. Sometimes we do that. But then I think the thing is about building trust, it is giving people the room to fail and
Mm.
then the room and then building up. Part of trust is saying,
You only know
hey,
that
I've
because you're a parent.
yeah, oh yeah. But also trust is saying, okay, I failed. What can we do better next time? Or hey, can you come help me? We need to clean up whatever mess this failure has made happen. And putting people in charge of things that aren't going to lead your business to your whole entire business to fail, but really looking at the things that you can trust people. And then sometimes verifying is you don't always have to do it in a visible way. Like
Yeah.
for instance, something you said about being a parent, my kids don't always know when I'm checking up on them on their location. They don't have to know. They know I've got the ability to do that. But same thing with your employees. Sometimes building a way that you can see. So this is a great case in point. A client who's gonna needing to do exactly what you're talking about, needing to take a little bit of the hands off the wheel. The issue is we don't have the visibility right now. So one of the things we're building in that company is some processes and some communication mechanisms that mean that this person doesn't need to necessarily communicate directly with the employee to say, hey, did you do this? But they're able to look in the system and the system says that task has been completed. So that if they are talking to, if this CEO is talking to, say, the CEO of the client, they're not completely out of the loop on what's happening, but they also don't need to be in the day to day of what's happening with every single client. So
Mm.
I think it's about building trust by allowing people a little bit more room. And as they grow as a person in your organization, whether it's time or whether it's their role gets bigger,
Mm.
that you're able to trust them with more.
These are all learned behaviors that you've acquired over time. Are there any really difficult leadership lessons that have caused a setback or some sort of suffrage that you've had to learn to overcome?
Yeah, I think there's an old, I think it's Oprah quoting Maya Angelou, which is when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. I think that I've had situations where I thought people would change, or I thought if I just could show them the light that I saw, that they would change. And some feedback I got from somebody I worked with, and when I asked for it, because I think asking for feedback is huge and it's not always fun, is she said, you get frustrated when you got the vision and others can't see it as clearly as you do, as quickly as you can. I think that I've learned to bring people along better. And then I've also learned to be a better judge of whether this person is the right fit for me to work with.
So, are you saying by what you just referenced from Oprah that people can't change?
I think people can change, but I think it's up to them to change. I can't make someone
Mm.
change.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I thought I heard you say otherwise. That's why I was like, I don't know if I agree with that.
No, people totally can change. And I think believe them when they demonstrate that they want to change too.
Mm. You've been around a lot of people in your life, and I know you personally, so I see you're always in a circle of people. Is there one characteristic that, or one quality that you think that you've observed in your personal experiences, your professional experiences, that all great leaders possess?
Curiosity,
Explain that.
curiosity about people, curiosity about what could be, curiosity about life. I think that you'd asked earlier about two types of CEOs, the one who kind of sits here aloof and that CEO, in my mind, also is the smartest person in their mind in every room they're in. They're not curious about others, and they're not curious about looking at things differently. And so I've said, if the CEO I'm potentially working with or the business owner is the smartest person in the room, I would happily lead them to a room that I'm not in. Because,
I say the same thing about me personally. If I'm the smartest person in the room, I don't want to be in that room anymore. And
yeah,
I firmly stand by that. So what's something that you do in your personal life that you would recommend for people potentially to at least explore and be curious about that makes you a better businesswoman, a better leader, a better human in general? What's something you're doing personally outside of that we don't know about?
personally, I like connecting with people. I do it in my personal life as well as my business life. And I allow those two things to overlap in a way that is comfortable for me. Not everyone that I know in the business sense is having dinner at my house, but there's a number who are. And so I think that be who you are in your personal life and in your professional life. And I think that's the thing that people often try to be a different person in one area
Showing
versus
up
the
with
next.
consistency is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Show up with consistency. Yeah.
How do you view risk as it pertains to your life and your business and your profession? What's your take on risk as a leader?
Yeah, I used to think that risk was a planned thing, and I think that the risks come in the unknown. But I think that I'm much more comfortable with risk than I used to be because I used to think you could plan it out. I literally had a spreadsheet before the 2008 recession. I had a spreadsheet that took me and my husband until we were 70 years old on exactly how much money we were going to, I mean, we were going to make this much more money and this much. And then life happened. I think I built that spreadsheet. And then the next day, the financial world collapsed. And I
Mm,
had a 10-month-old and a husband in the construction industry. And we literally hit a point where we could not pay for daycare
mm.
because when nobody was constructing things. So I think my tolerance for risk is bigger because I've lived through some things that were unpredictable. I've lived through financial insecurity for us, not to the extremes that some people have, but not feeling like I knew what life was going to look like.
Mm.
And I've also seen friends have big things happen. So I think that my tolerance for risk is greater because I also believe that I'm more resilient
Mm.
and I believe that I have more knowledge than I used to. And it's not as,
One of the things I heard you say, even though you didn't say it a few seconds ago, is when you had charted out your financial trajectory and then shit happened. There are things that are within our locus of control and things that we just have zero control over. And it's pretty obvious in that statement. How do you handle, or what advice would you give to people in terms of controlling the controllables and just releasing the things that you cannot have any control over whatsoever?
yeah. I think it is understanding what it is you need to do each day to make that day a good day. And any business that you're building or growing or sustaining, you need to know what a good day looks like
Hmm.
for you so that you can feel satisfied at the end of it. And you can also hold yourself accountable when you're not meeting that goal. Yeah, I think and that has to be about the things that you can control.
Mm.
I can't control how you feel about something or how somebody else feels about something, but I can control how I either act or react in what
Yeah.
I do.
I- Is there one thing that you would share that you wish more people would understand about this idea of success, long-term success, short-term success, but just success in general?
I think I'm not the first one to say it, that success people think is a destination, both in personal life and in professional life. My spreadsheet, I had a very clear line of financial success. And that was the most important to me at that time,
Mm.
because I thought that was the foundation for a happy life and a sustainable marriage. And I flipped it
Mm.
and think that what you need to like success looks like keeping yourself whole. Success looks like building others up. And it also looks like being able to lay your head on the pillow and know that you've been a good person that day
Mm.
and that you're contributing to the world in a way that you feel you can contribute. So success looks a little different.
What are the most important vectors to Shay? Like, what is it at the core of who you are that are like, these are my values? This is what I truly believe in.
Yeah. It's helping others achieve what they want to achieve. So if I can, connect you with someone that can help you achieve what you want to achieve, if I can help a business leader or a business owner grow the business or sustain the business, not everyone is in growth mode. I've got a a prospect I'm working with that wants to retire out of their business, and they just need sustainable leadership to do that. And so what I need to do with them is help them say, hey, how do we keep this organization at an even keel so that somebody else could come in and start to run the organization? At the end of the day, for me, success is helping others get what they want and
That sounds a
succeed.
lot like more coaching than fractional CMO. So if I stripped away your job title, if I
Yeah.
stripped away your resume, your credentials, all of your experiences, who are you at your core and what is your value proposition? What do you bring to the world?
Yeah, I think being a true partner for people, and that's in my personal life and in my professional life, it's being something that people can count on to
Mm.
tell you the things that you need to. So, for instance, that that particular client, it will be more coaching, but part of the coaching is getting in there and putting the processes in place, and part of it is helping them see the hard truth.
Mm.
Like that organization right now isn't financially sustainable for somebody else. It has the potential to be, but I have to be able to say, what? The new CEO won't take the same salary that you're going to take. So we've got to build that into what's next for the organization. So I think
Mm.
what I do really well is partner with people in an honest way that
Mm.
is hopefully compassionate, but also telling them the hard truths when I see them and also telling them the really cool things when I see them.
Being a leader, especially in your capacity where you're guiding other people and more importantly when you're guiding other leaders, sometimes you have to have unpopular opinions about things and you do have to speak the truth like you just said.
Yeah.
You do have to give the honest, hard truth and hold them accountable, their feet to the fire if you must, or compassionate, however you put it. But is there a unpopular opinion that you see on a regular basis that you have to share with other people in your position?
When you talk about unpopular things, my mind immediately goes to needing to let people go.
Mm.
And letting people go is not a bad thing. If you don't lose sleep over it, then I think you got to look at your own humanity. But every
Mhm.
time I've needed to let people go, it's because there's a fundamental mismatch between what the organization needs to achieve and what they personally have the skills, ability, or desire to achieve.
Mhm.
So I think that being able to be compassionate when you're doing hard things is huge. So the unpopular, I worked for one CEO who said they'd never let anyone go. And I should have seen that as a huge red flag
Mm.
because there were some very unproductive and unaccountable people within that organization.
Are there universal blind spots that people hold on to, or does this vary from person to person?
I think it totally varies from person to person.
Is there a more common blind spot that you see more often than not?
Okay, this is going to be a little bit paradoxical. That the common blind spot is not thinking you have blind spots. I
Do you have
mean,
blind?
truly,
What are your blind spots?
I would say that, gosh, you put me on a spot with that one because I definitely have them. I think my blind spot is thinking that my directness is always appreciated because I like direct people. So I typically will say it like it is and surround myself with people who are direct. And I don't think that's always um, needed. So I think I've gotten better at keeping some things to myself. Um, my other blind spot is I have a bias towards action. And so I think that things need to happen quickly and they need to happen like get on it. And I don't understand why other people don't do things quickly.
I share that blind spot.
Yeah, yeah. And my blind spot is that can be a bad thing. I've done things too quickly sometimes and gone, if I would just give it a minute. I worked with a coach who said, if you're ever going to send something, if you can't wait overnight, at least wait 4 hours. So she had it the four hour rule. And I'm like, what if I already have the response ready to go? I've typed it up and it sounds perfect in the terrible tone that I'm about to send it.
Yeah.
And I started doing that. And it's one of those things.
I wait 24 hours as well. I learned that early on in my corporate career. I sent off a scathing email to somebody who was clearly wrong and didn't know nearly as much as I did about anything. And I had to face the wrath of my boss the next morning. He's like, dude, just give it 24 hours. You'll be surprised what happens. Go for a walk, go home, go to the gym, go do something. Just don't respond to the email that's pissed you off. So it's really good advice. If you were to receive a letter from 20 years from now, Shay, what might that letter say to you?
I would hope it started with, you helped me do this. Like one cool thing, I ran into somebody the other day. So this is from 20 years ago. His daughter had attended one of my financial workshops when I was doing this financial stuff. And it's been about 10 to 12 years.
Mm.
And he said that she has her own thriving financial advisory practice. And he said that was a influential moment for her. And I was like, that's super cool. I had no idea. So I think that 20 years from now, something along the lines of you helped me achieve X. And it might be a personal thing or it might be a professional thing, but it's someone achieving what they wanted to, and that I was an instrumental part in that.
If you were to write your legacy out today, what would that say? What would that be?
It would really be around those, the legacy being she helped people get what they want, and she helped people grow and challenge themselves. And so I have a friend, Stacey Cassio, who has a fantastic company that does mentorship. She'd be a great podcast host for you, or not host, a guest for you. But she has a mentorship assessment, and I am a horizon mentor. And what that means is I'm really good at helping people see what's on the horizon and give them the courage and confidence to go for what that is. And so I think my legacy, hopefully, is that I've mentored a number of people and that they've done things that they didn't know that they could achieve, or they didn't have the confidence until I helped them get that confidence.
Shay, it's been a really cool conversation. I really appreciate it. What's the best way for people to find you?
Yep, it is Shay at North 12. 12 is the number 12 at north12partners.com, or check us out at north12partners.com, or connect or follow me on LinkedIn.
I really appreciate the time you devoted to the branding laboratory. You handled all the hot seat questions really well. Thank you for being a guest.
Thank you, Deevo. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to listening to more of your episodes.
Please do. Thank you, Shay.
Thanks.
Another great show under the belt. Thank you, Shay, for taking the time and the energy to be part of the Brand Laboratory. If you want to check out Shay, once again, that's www.north12partners.com. You can find her on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and all of that information should be in the show notes here, there. I don't even know where it goes anymore. But she is a fractional strategy and growth officer. And if you want to grow and scale your business, but you're unclear on your purpose behind it or the direction that you need to take for that, she works as a fractional consultant to help you do that. So Shay, thank you for coming on and sharing your insights. For anyone listening who is ready to also stop spinning their wheels and actually execute on their growth strategy, I do very similar things to Shay, so I don't want to like step on her toes, but I'm centered around brand messaging and getting that message correct so people like Shay can then take that and execute that. So shameless plug, if you're looking to figure out what your brand message looks like. Who are you? What do you do? What problems do you solve? How do you show up and build your brand around who you are and your unique zone of genius? Then I can help you with that, and then we can hand you off to Shay. So anyway, thank you for your time today. And now you have a lot of different things going on. So if you got any value from this episode, please do share it with somebody who needs to hear it. Leave me a review and tell me how amazing this show is so that we can get other cool people. And please follow us on social media for deeper conversations. I'm bringing on fascinating leaders, strategists, entrepreneurs, people who can help you become a better leader, a better individual, a better human, and a better business owner. If you're interested in being a guest, you can also send me a message. If you know someone who would make a good guest, please send me a message. Anyhow, until next time, I'm Deevo. You have been listening to the Branding Laboratory. I'll see you on the next episode.